computer. Look at that. So welcome, guys. As just previously discussed, we're going to be looking at debunking the myths around nutrition for fat loss. Please, at any time, if anyone has any questions, stop, ask me, and I'll happily answer them. So the first one, funnily enough, John, is around intermittent fasting. At the top of each slide, we're going to have sort of the common myths that we hear. So in this case, fasting causes weight loss. Now, does it? This one was quite easy to understand in that the only time restricted eating, that's TRE, would cause weight loss would be if you were removing calories by eating less meals, like we just discussed, John. That basically, if it's isocaloric, meaning exactly the same calories, nothing would change. There would be no difference whether you eat 5 meals, 10 meals, or anything else. Even doing fasted cardio, if anyone's seen our social media, I did a piece around when you do fasted cardio, your body uses fat for energy, which we think, oh, fantastic, that's exactly what we want to do, we want to burn fat. Except what happens later in the day, it burns a greater proportion of carbohydrate and stops burning so much fat. So, and vice versa, if you did it fed, it would burn more carbohydrate, and then later in the day would burn more fat, totaling to exactly the same calories. So it makes not the blindest bit of difference in terms of weight loss, whether you do your fasted cardio or fed cardio. Like it says here, you'll use fat as an energy source and vice versa. It's called fat oxidation and carb oxidation when you're burning it. Now, they did do studies on shift workers, and obviously their times of eating are different probably to, I guess, in inverted commas, your normal person, your 9 to 5 or slightly outside those hours. And a bit of a side note, what they noticed was that if you could keep your shift exactly the same and have the same window of eating, that was more beneficial than switching shifts and having your times change. But that's nothing to do with calories. It is to do with calories eventually. It's because what they found was because they were getting tired from the change of shifts, they would then consume more calories. So what does that tell us? All of that, it's calories in, calories out. It's not intermittent fasting. Doesn't really change anything there. Artificial sweeteners, a bit more, a few more myths around this one. A lot of the time over my career, I've heard you must only eat single ingredient foods. Now, what is a single ingredient food? Hence the picture of the blueberries. Now, if we look at this big list here, they are the ingredients. When I say here, can you guys see this like circle, or is that just my end?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, yeah, so this list here is the ingredients of a blueberry, a naturally occurring blueberry. There is nothing which is single ingredient. Now, other ones I've heard along the time, and actually when I first started out and I didn't have my nutritional knowledge that I have now, I told people sweeteners cause insulin spikes because my mentor at the time told me that, and it's not actually true at all. Those of you who know Lizzie know she loves a Pepsi Max. I'm also, I also quite like them. They do not cause insulin spikes because there's no calories to them. Nothing like that happens at all. And they cause cancer is the other one I've heard. So I'm going to go into each one of those in a bit more depth. So anyone who watched or listened to Stephen Bartlett's podcast with Tim Spector, he talked about the gut microbiome and how these sweeteners change your gut microbiome. Those were done in vivo, so in animals, not in humans, where we saw any change to the gut microbiome, unless that person had already had issues within their gut microbiome. And if you did, I can guarantee you would know by now, because you'd have leaky gut or some other, you'd have some symptoms. So when a inverted commas normal person, so asymptomatic person, drank any sweetened drink or any sweetened food, there was no change to the gut microbiome. what about cancer? It's a type 2B carcinogenic, which is equivalent to a mobile phone. It's equivalent to aloe vera, and funnily enough, equivalent to being a hairdresser. I'm not sure what the carcinogens around hairdressers are, but that's one I read. It would, I think, to increase the chance of cancer, you'd need, if I remember, by 1%, you would need 14 cans of Diet Coke for a 70-kilo person per day. So you are really, really pushing the boat out there. And if you're drinking that much Diet Coke, you probably have a bigger issue.
Yeah, definitely.
And the last one is all the data shows that replacement of full sugar drinks or high-fat foods in replacement for sweetened foods, so artificial sweeteners, have no negative impact on health and only help with fat loss, because at the end of the day, so what does this tell us? Calories in, calories out. I imagine that you guys are going to get somewhat of a theme here. Any questions so far? No? Cool. Veganism and veggies. Now, before I get into this one, this can obviously be quite a touchy subject. So if it's around morals, religion, or anything else, absolutely, who am I to tell you any different? But when it comes to fat loss and health, I'm going to put my neck on the line. A common one I've heard before is I went vegan, lost weight, and felt amazing. Now, realistically, let's see if either of you can hazard a guess as to why that might be.
No protein. I don't know. I mean, there's no low. It's very low in fat, high in fiber.
Possibly. Emily?
Is it just lower calories but high volume, so you get one of them?
There'll be some lower calories in that. Obviously, if you're cutting out you're not completely cutting it out, but kind of cutting out a large food group in that you're cutting out most proteins. However, if you're going vegan, you can no longer eat chocolate. You can probably no longer eat biscuits. You can no longer eat so many things that have sort of butter and milk and eggs and all these foods in, when actually basically what you're reduced to is vegetables. So you're likely to feel a hell of a lot better because you've stopped eating a load of rubbish, and therefore your calories are probably reduced. It's the same with gluten. People always often make this association of gluten giving them a bad stomach, as I did for many, many years. And actually, if I cut out bread and I cut out the things I quite enjoy, like I'm not gonna lie, I'm partial to a cake, and a piece of chocolate doesn't have it, but I like these things. I make no bones about it. If I cut those out, guess what? I feel 10 times better. And it's nothing to do with the gluten, because I can get gluten elsewhere. It's just all of a sudden I've stopped eating these very, very, what's the word? There's an acronym, FODMAP foods. So high fermented carbohydrates, like cake, basically. So when you stop eating that, yes, you will feel better. Now, this one is one that, if you guys have heard of Game Changers, the documentary about veganism, so they pulled this one out. Vegans have a longer life expectancy, lower cholesterol total, lower heart disease by 25%, and lower BMI. All true. However, if we look at typically who are vegans, they are health-seeking people. If you think of where you might find a vegan, often in a health food shop or Whole Foods type place, often in gyms, they look after their health, whereas they took the same amount of people as meat eaters, and they were smokers, drinkers, not going to the gym regularly, and that's why typically you had that. So what they then did on the back of that study was take people who had been veggies or vegans from birth and omnivores from birth. And actually what they found is between the two, there was no difference in mortality, in all-cause mortality. Does that make sense? Because basically they were doing it from birth, so they weren't actively health seekers. They just grew up with that lifestyle. And health seekers, both meat eaters and vegans, had half the all-cause mortality ratio as just meat eaters alone. Make sense? Cool. So, well, I just answered what could it be. Meat eaters as well have a greater muscle mass, muscle retention, better bone mineral density, less common sarcopenia, and less osteoporosis. So that's both of those are around losing bone mineral density and muscle mass as you get older, and therefore they typically, omnivores will not suffer these diseases as much, and therefore won't suffer from falls as much as people who don't have as much muscle mass. In fact, I learned this, I should know this, 2 days ago, 75% less likely with every kilo of muscle mass, lean muscle mass on your body, you're 75% less likely to have a fall above the age of 65. So the more muscle mass you have, the less likely you are to fall, which, there you go, Big John. And that's massive, because on the back of that, we were talking about Michael Mosley. So my client who presented that, he's 86, right? So obviously we have a lot of these conversations around falling and whatnot. And what it then leads to is they become institutionalized, go into homes, they then stop eating, therefore lose a lot of weight, can fall more easily. And off the back of a fall can come a whole load of other things. It's not like if obviously we fall. So it's really, really important we maintain that muscle mass. And one of the main amino acids, which vegans can't really get, or veggies can't really get, is leucine. And that's the one that holds muscle retention and builds muscles mostly. So that only comes in meat. So you'd have to supplement it. And then finally, probably my absolute favorite, because Tim Spector did my head in when he did that thing, and I think he's a massive sellout. I think it was you, John, we were speaking at that. He invested 38 million. Stephen Bartlett invested 38 million into Zoe study, so Tim Spector's study, on the back of Stephen Bartlett's podcast. So that tells you something. Tim Spector is one of the world's best professors in the gut microbiome. He's not a professor in insulin, blood glucose, or fat loss, but he claims that the best way to lose body fat is to monitor your glucose levels, which is quite an interesting one, considering A, we don't need to, and I'll go into that, but B, people have lost weight for many, many years. I've been on stage, I've done photo shoots, I've worked with clients for 12 years, none of which monitored their glucose. So all studies showed when calories and protein are equated, it makes no difference for fat loss whether the rest of your calories come from fat or carb. I imagine both of you probably know that by now, but if not, it doesn't make the blindest bit of difference at all. If there is a case potentially for insulin resistance with the very, very obese, but again, if you got them to move a bit more and eat less calories, that body fat would reduce a lot quicker, and then we can start talking about insulin resistance. So it's not really a thing. I put the but because I was trying to emulate someone's voice when, but what about insulin spikes? Because I hear that all the time. And insulin switches off fat burning. The rise of a spike in insulin here does switch off fat oxidation. But like I said, with the fasted cardio, it increases carb oxidation. So actually, you end up burning the same calories. Postprandial spikes, so post-eating, are entirely normal, and non-diabetic return back to base level relatively quickly. And I was doing my studying just before this, and this actually popped up on my module, so I thought I'd include this. And it's hours after meal. It might be quite small for you guys. So this bottom blue one is normal, so non-diabetic person. I'm colorblind as well. I think that's red. The middle one is pre-diabetic, and the top one, I'm not even going to guess what color that is. Yellow. Is diabetic. So what you'll see is this is their normal blood glucose levels. They then eat, and look what happens to a diabetic. It goes right up by, 200 nanomoles per litre of blood, and then still stays elevated for a really, really long time. Whereas your normal, in inverted commas, starts just below 100, postprandial spikes after about 1.5 to 2 hours, and then literally just returns straight back to normal. And that it just stays there until you next eat. There is absolutely no reason to monitor your blood glucose levels. What would happen if you had sweets? That spike, this bottom one, would be slightly higher, yes, because they're high sugar, so they'd spike your insulin a little bit more. And then guess what? It returns straight back to normal pretty quick. My mentor for my nutrition degree, he's I don't know if you guys know Martin McDonald, and basically he showed what would happen to a child if you gave a inverted commas normal child sweets who wasn't diabetic, and basically they'd get high, but then they would literally collapse on the floor like a battery's just run out. Whereas I have 2 children, actually what happens is they get a bit grumpy and a bit tired, but they don't just collapse on the floor. And that is because they don't have diabetes. So again, what does it tell us? Basically, calories in, calories out, rules. There is no other way to lose fat loss. It's what's called the law of thermodynamics. We don't need to look at any of these other weird and wonderful things. There are methods to do it, and if intermittent fasting works for you, fantastic. If low carb works for you, fantastic, but it doesn't matter. And actually, like John said right at the start, before we started recording, it's really, really hard to live a life like that. And to be honest, I think it'd be pretty miserable. Whereas if you ate a lot of protein and fill the rest of your calories with some pretty healthy food, plus some tastier bits, some probably more palatable things along the way, you're going to live a happy, healthy life and lose some body fat, which was the goal.